Hello everyone, welcome to my channel and welcome to my first tutorial video. In this video I'll be showing you how to create a patch of sunflowers in SpeedTree. So let's get started. We start off by creating our first node, in this case a trunk tube. It will be the stem for our sunflower. As you can see, it's way too big at the moment. So scale it down by adjusting its length in the spine tab and its radius in the skin tab. Setting it to around 2 meters in length and about 5 centimeters in diameter should be fine. That looks way better already. The next step is setting the amount of segments SpeedTree will generate for us. We want to keep it low since this is going to be a low poly model, mainly for performance reasons. Because the more vertices and triangles your model has, the more computations your CPU and GPU have to do in order to render it. I used the yellow curve there to adjust the way the segments are distributed along its length. We want to have it evenly spread out across its entire length. Also, the radial segments are at a minimum since you won't be able to see the plant up close anyway. Hashtag performance, I guess. Alright, next up, setting a material for your trunk. You can see I already prepared some materials up front. For the trunk, it's just a simple color since again, the trunk won't really be visible and doesn't need to be detailed. Hashtag performance. Next up, leaves. Go to your trunk tube, right click and add little branches to it. Disable the skin since they only serve as a base for our fronds. I don't pick a leaf mesh since I want to have fronds and branches here. This is because for bigger leaves, fronds are often the way to go. They're easier to bend and sway a little nicer in the wind. Go to the generation tab and pick proportional steps. Set the steps to around 4 or 5 and set the number per step to around 3, whatever you prefer. As you can see, they're all perfectly aligned and don't look natural. In order to fix that, we play around with the offset, sweep and roll. Add a little variance here and there to make it look even more random. The variance option, by the way, is a nice tool for giving each generated instance a random offset of the base value. Good. Now we can add fronds to our branches. So, surprise surprise, you right click little branches and add fronds. Apply your leaf material to actually see how the leaves look. You can find lots of free pictures online that are ideal for cutting out the desired leaf texture you want. In GIMP, for example, you can generate a nice normal texture. The normal texture serves the purpose of giving the surface a nice shaded 3D look without having to have a detailed mesh. For your opacity texture, just take the color texture and use the alpha channel, provided of course the background of your texture is transparent. You can already see I prepared the meshes the material will use up front. You have 3 different levels of detail your mesh can have: high, medium and low. Just make sure your mesh obviously gets less detail from high to low. Also note the white point with the orange line will determine which way your mesh will face and where it starts. Next, we will position the leaves correctly, adjust the size of the leaves, and add a little gravitational bend to it. Go to the Geometry tab of the front object and adjust its boundary start value, so that our leaf actually starts at the stem. You can see our leaves are way too big at the top and still way too detailed. Switch over to the little branches object and go to the Segments tab. We set the absolute length value to around 4. And in the Spine tab we adjust the curve that determines the leaf size proportional to its position on the stem. I choose a linear decay curve so that the leaves get smaller the farther up we get on the stem. Adjust the end value so that the leaves at the end are not too small. And lastly, we add a little variance to the size of the leaves. Just play around with these settings a little to get a result that you like. The next thing we do is, we go to the Spine tab and add a gravity bend. Again, adjust the curve, the amount and the starting angle until you're happy with it. Alright, now we can finally add our sunflower blossom on top. To achieve this, we add a single branch to it and set the option Extend to Any. This way the base for the blossom will stick out of the top instead of the side. Just make sure to set the amount in your generation tab to 0 so that only the top one remains. Right now the base is obviously way too long. Set its length to like 1 centimeter and disable its skin, cause again, it only serves as a base and it's not gonna be visible. Hey, and this time it's not even about performance, it's just for sticking on that shiny blossom. For the blossom itself, we use a leaf mesh, this time instead of a frond. So right click on the single branch and add a leaf mesh. Set the correct material, again, just get a proper texture of your liking, set the normal map and prepare the mesh from high to low. Just make sure to position the white dot in the middle so that the blossom is positioned correctly on the branch. Then we rotate the blossom so that it faces upwards. For this step, go to the orientation tab and set the right value to 0.5. I noticed that our blossom is way too shiny here, so we switch over to our materials and set the gloss value accordingly. Then I adjust the blossom size and just get a quick check on how the plant looks off screen. It's a good idea, by the way, to just zoom out and check the overall look of your plant to see if it fits what you're actually going for. You might have already noticed, our blossom is completely flat and looks unnatural. So for this, go to the Skin tab and play around with the settings in the deformation section. I go for a subtle deformation, since the mesh is quite simple and would look too messy if we applied too much deformation. Again, I also just play around with the settings here until I'm satisfied with the result. Alright, so now we want to add a bend to our stem, since a perfectly straight sunflower would look a bit weird. Go to the Spine tab and play around with the early and late settings to get the deformation that you want. Nice! Now we have a single sunflower, but we actually want an entire patch of sunflowers. Again, performance, who would have seen that coming? To get a nice little patch of cute sunflowers, we need to adjust the radius that our tree object as a whole can occupy. Getting more plants in the mix is done via adjusting the generation settings of our initial trunk tube. I set the mode to proportional and again, play around with the settings from amount to position, from boundaries to rotation. You get the idea. In this stage I actually adjust them a lot, so thank me for cutting this. Yay, I did it! So for the next part, I want my sunflowers to face out of the middle, that they don't look too clustered. In order to achieve this, I add a magnet as a force in the middle. This bends them out of the middle. Since the model is almost done and I'm not entirely happy with the result yet, I just keep playing around with the settings a bit. Good, I am happy with the result now. So, only the last few steps await. That means setting up your level of detail, or LODs. For those of you who don't know, the LOD system is basically having multiple meshes of the same object from a higher to a lower resolution with a decreasing count of vertices. Basically all games use this technique. What it does is it replaces a high resolution mesh with a lower resolution mesh the farther away and thus the smaller the object is. So for example, a highly detailed character with like 10,000 vertices will be replaced by a mesh with only 500 vertices at a distance of like 30 meters or something like that. So for our model that means going to the tree object and adjusting the values in the distance LOD tab. Also, don't forget to check the settings in your leaf and blossom meshes to determine which mesh will be picked at which level of detail. The slider on the left here that I'm using right now is to slide between the different LOD levels and see how they look. It is, of course, a good idea to just zoom out quite far and check how your LODs look from a distance. And again, no surprise, just play around with the settings here. What I did forget to show here is that you can just use the wind wizard that SpeedTree offers to bake the wind settings into your model so that your model actually reacts to wind. Finally, save and export everything and you're good to go. I hope you liked this video. Let me know down in the comments. Please also make sure to subscribe to my channel, and I would highly appreciate it if you would also support me on my Patreon. All my links are in the description. Thanks everybody, see you next time.